Now, if you've got your language paper 2 mock this week and you're still not sure what you're supposed to be doing, you might want to listen for the next few minutes. So, first off, AQA Language Paper 2 is your non-fiction, which means real life text, letters, articles, speeches, blogs, diaries, okay? And you will get 2 extracts, which could be from the 19th, 20th or 21st century. They'll both be from different centuries. And you have to deal with both texts, which is, I think, one of the first reasons why people find paper 2 a little bit harder than paper 1. It is still just 1 hour 45 minutes and it is still 80 marks overall. Again, your extracts will look like this: source A, source B, and you are still given about as a guide about 60 minutes to deal with section A, which is obviously questions 1 to 4. Your reading section just the same as on paper 1. So your question 1 on paper 2 is again 4 marks, 5 minutes. This time though, rather than being multiple choice, there is still a multiple choice, so to speak, but you are given 8 statements and you have to find which 4 of those statements are true. And again, it will give you lines to take your answers from or to find your answers. Again, do not overthink it, but certainly don't take it for granted. Do not skim read. They will change and tweak the wording of these statements in order to sound right, first off. And it might just be a case of one word has been changed to make it false. So just like on paper 1, deal with each statement individually. So A, go back to lines 1 to 7 in this case. B, back to lines 1 to 7. Can you find it or not? C, back to lines 1 to 7. Can you find it or not? And so on and so forth. Because again, at the end of the day, 4 marks is a grade boundary. Question 2 then. This one, again, 8 marks, 10 minutes. 2 developed paragraphs or 4 shorter ones, because it is a summary. There's no analysis. You do not need writer's methods for this question. However, the structure is pretty much the same. It's just point, quotation, inference. Notice how I didn't say point and method, just point, quotation, inference. However, you'll be talking about source A, then source B, then source A, then source B, or just source A and source B, source A and source B. It depends how you want to set it out or how you've been taught to set it out. But ultimately, it will say the writers of source A and source B are travelling in different types of trains. What can you infer about the differences between the 2 trains? So it will give you a very specific thing from the extracts to talk about. One of the biggest mistakes, other than including writers' methods when they are not needed for this question 2 summary, is that people just talk about whatever they want. In source A, this happens. In source B, this happens. They will give you a focus. So make sure you're highlighting your question and you know exactly what you're talking about. Again, your marks are coming from your inferences. So choose good quotations that you can infer a lot from. So in source A, the writer states this, therefore I think this. However, in source B, the writer says this, therefore I can infer this. You can still zoom in. The word this further connotes or further suggests or makes me further infer, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but again, 8 marks, 10 minutes, 2 quotations minimum, 4 maximum. Set it out, 1 paragraph, source A and B, if you want to talk about them together. Next paragraph, source A and B, if you want to talk about them together. Or source A, then source B, then source A, then source B. But ultimately, it is just point, quotation, inference. Question 3, I'm not going to spend long on this, even though it is 12 marks, so it's getting a bit more important now. It's 12 marks, spend about 15 minutes on it, but this is just your bog standard analysis. This is your point and method, quotation and inferences, connotations, effects. Okay, now 3 to 4 good quotations, because you need at least 3 to 4 developed paragraphs, because again, there are a few more marks at stake here. This one, whilst it does give you lines to take your answers from, it will not give you the actual lines again, like it does in paper 1. So make sure that you section off on your extract and that you are answering the correct question. So how does the writer use language to describe the train crash in this instance? So again, it'll give you something very particular to talk about. And again, do not start your answer with the writer uses language, because we know that. Be specific, remember. And this one, it's just based on one source. Usually source A, but just make sure you've highlighted just in case they ask you to look at source B instead for this one. But it will just be one source. Question 4 then, again, this is where it is getting pretty serious because it's 16 marks. So you're going to be spending about 20 minutes again. You're going to be writing at least 4 developed paragraphs. Also, you may want to do a little introduction or a thesis statement and a little conclusion. But again, that's not necessarily necessary as long as you are doing source A, source B, source A, source B. Very similar to the structure of question 2 on this paper. However, this question, whilst you've got to talk about both, it is asking about the writer's thoughts and feelings on whatever the topic is that the extracts are based on. Okay, so it could be worded in a number of ways. They might say different feelings, perspectives, attitudes, beliefs, doesn't matter. It's writer's thoughts and feelings. Okay, so where you would naturally say in analysis, this would make the reader think, or this would highlight the reader thoughts of, you are now talking about the writer. You bring everything back to the writer. This suggests the writer believes. This highlights the writer's feelings of. This implies that the writer could think, perhaps the writer wants. Now, one of the extracts will be quite easy to see. The writer's thoughts and feelings will be very obvious. The second one will be harder. You're going to have to really dig deep and infer, because one of them will probably be more unbiased and maybe more like of a report type, professional tone. So you just have to dig deep. You're going to have to just pull out words and say, whilst this is more of a report, unbiased style, the fact he uses the word horror could imply the writer thinks, the writer feels. But ultimately, it is still just point, method, quotation, inference. All you're doing is bringing it back to the writer's thoughts and feelings. So your question 5 will ask you to now write a piece of non-fiction, and they could ask you to write an article, a letter, a speech, an essay, a blog, whatever. Okay. Now, at this point, especially with mocks, we don't need to overthink the little intricate differences between these text types. So what I mean by that is, whatever you are asked to write, whether it is a speech, whether it is a letter, whether it is an article, simply your structure is going to be an introduction that again draws the examiner in, 2, 3, 4 maximum paragraphs, each paragraph dealing with one of your arguments, because you're going to have one clear argument, one clear opinion, and then a little conclusion that sums it all up and repeats something from your opening. Now, the biggest thing with this, or the biggest tips, is firstly, they give you this one in a statement, and lots of people confuse it with question 4, paper 1. Do not make that mistake. Do not start with, I agree with the statement. No articles start with, I agree with the statement. Okay? Be creative. The mark scheme for this is exactly the same as the mark scheme for question 5 on paper 1. So be creative, use your devices, use your ambitious vocab, your punctuation and your sentence structures, and you can't go wrong.